So there was an interesting Washington Post article that came out just yesterday, and it was talking about the liberal and the conservative media outlets throughout the United States. And it was talking about that there were a lot of liberal and there were some moderates and there were some conservative outlets. Now, specifically talking about the liberal outlets, when people say that the United States and many of our media outlets have a liberal bias, I will usually respond to that and say, that's false. Now, that's not to say we don't have biases, but a liberal bias, not so much. Now, let me go through the biases I think persist throughout our media system. The first of which is a sensationalism bias. That would be, for example, our obsession with ISIS and the obsession that ISIS can take over the whole world and that ISIS can come into the United States when they haven't killed a single American on U.S. soil, or North Korea trying to nuke us when they're not going to come. They're not that strong. It's something that puts fear into Americans. Or for example, Ebola. I mean, Ebola. Oh my God, Ebola is going to come destroy us. But the news outlets fail to understand the premise that if you have a basic health standard and health system in developed nations, it's really not going to affect them because you can quarantine it and rigor it off. It's in these developing nations where it's worse, but I'm kind of a little ranting a little bit. But that's the big thing. It's something that gets you interested and motivated, and I kind of understand that to a sense because, they're trying to get viewers. They're paid off by large corporations, large multinational corporations. They're trying to make a profit, and this is one way to do it. But it's still a bias that persists in the media. And the second of which kind of goes through with the funding, and that's the elitist bias. Now, when I say that, I mean that when they comment on things, they comment it from a standpoint that the establishment or the elite is correct or right. And this can go back to, let's say, our torture report that was recently released. It was disturbing, despicable, so many words you can say it. And many outlets, they had so many people on. They had Dick Cheney. They had the head of the CIA, who instigated the torture. They had these people on, but who they didn't have on was they didn't have the actual victims. And it's quite key that they didn't have these victims because it would have shown that these acts were, one, wrong and they were unhuman. But when you look at it from the eyes of the established people, or let's say Dick Cheney or the CIA, you kind of get it from a perspective that, except for a couple of mild things that went wrong, it was a good action we did. And by having this bias, it doesn't seem like what the U.S. did in that instance was bad. And this kind of goes on in a lot of things. We don't comment on things that are really bad. And we tell it from a point of view that it's not that bad. And there's a last one as well. And this one is kind of one that was presented to me recently. And this is what I like to consider the false 50-50 bias. What do I mean by that? Well, in the U.S. we have two major parties. It's the Democrats and the Republicans, right? Well, in many outlets, the chief of this, I would say, is CNN. Well, whereas they give the Democrats 50%, they give the Republicans 50%, and then they shut up. They don't give any more. They just give them 50%, shut up, don't give them any more. And they give each story like one side holds 50% merit and the other side holds 50% merit, like it's an even debate. When in most instances, it's not an even debate. I'll go back to the torture report. They tried to give a 50-50. From a liberal point of view, wasn't that good. From a conservative point, all right, they didn't give any more beyond that. They were not trying to say that the torture report doesn't have a 50%. It is morally and humanitarianly disturbing and wrong on every freaking level. It was freaking horrible. When you're rectally feeding someone, that is wrong. That's absolutely wrong. But the media is not going to report on it like that. And those are our biases. And that's something for everyone to know. Thank you.